All right, let's start off by saying Barak Atha Yahawah, Ba'ashem Yahawashi, Ba'ashem Qadash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is There Were ... And pretty much this is a lesson dealing with these false prophets today. And you know, I was watching Elder Apostle Tahar's video yesterday, and you know, dealing with these new ninjas, you know, from the Wi-Fi and others, you know. And I've been meditating on this all day yesterday and part of the day today. I wanted to do a lesson on it, but it was just kind of building up. So we're just gonna, you know, flow in the spirit and get into it, because these same individuals that come up against the men of the Lord, you know, they wouldn't dare, you know, act up on their job. You know, when it comes to Esau, they'll be, you know, good little Boy Scouts, you know, but then when it comes to following the orders of the Lord Yahawashi through men that he established, they have a problem with that. You know, and pretty much there's a serious spirit of insolence out there, you know. And the word insolence means the trait of being rude and impertinent, inclined to take liberties. And that's what these guys are doing. They're taking liberties. They're being presumptuous. You know, they're taking liberties. They're pretty much doing whatever the hell they want to do. You know, they pretty much speak evil of dignities. They don't, you know, like order. When the Lord said, you know, let all things be done decently and in order through the mouth of the Apostle Paul. Another definition is an offensive, disrespectful, impudent act. And that's pretty much what it is. You know, these individuals that are doing this, they're pretty much, you know, very disrespectful, and pretty much they take liberties, you know. So the chapter we're going to deal with today, Lord's will, it's going to be in the book of Peter, you know. But before we get to that, I was listening to the book of Peter this morning. No, yesterday actually. And this morning. And there was one part yesterday that stuck out to me, and I wrote it down real quick, because I wanted to, you know, Lord's will, start the lesson off with that, which is building on this, you know, insolent spirit. You know, and the scripture, the first scripture we're going to get is the book of 1 Peter 5:5, where it says, likewise ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. See? So that's the problem. The problem is that these young bucks, these upstarts, if you want to call them that, you know, they refuse to submit themselves, you know, to the men that came before them. And the scriptures instruct us and tell us that we have entered into other men's labors. So if we enter into other men's labors, we're not entering into our own labors. So if we're entering into other men's labors, we should have, first and foremost, respect, honor for our elders, which these guys don't have. You know, they don't have the honor for the elders. They don't, you know, they don't reverence the hoary head. You know, they just pretty much, y'all just some old niggas. You know, y'all finished. You know, y'all should retire. You know, you should just go in the box somewhere. We got this. We'll handle this. You know. So the word submit yourselves in the Greek is hupotasso, which means to arrange under, to subordinate, right? To arrange under, to subject, subject, sub, under, inject is rule, under the rule. So under the rule of who? Under the rule of the elder. Because the Lord set up the elders to teach, you know, and to, if it wasn't for the elders, that you have now and from the elders before us, you know, you wouldn't have had this truth or this knowledge. You would have still been a simple GMO baby out in the world. You know, it's now you're just a simple GMO baby, you know, that knows that you're an Israelite. And that's just as bad or even worse. That's the worst kind. Inside joke. Right? So let's read this again. It says, likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. See? Be subject one to another and be clothed with humility, not pride. This is why scripture say, you know, least being a novice, being lifted up with pride, fall into the condemnation of the devil. And that's what's happening. For the Most High resisted the proud and giveth grace to the humble. Read this quick precept the brother put up, Ecclesiasticus 7:4. It says, seek not of the Lord preeminence, neither of the king the seat of honor. Right, and that's going to go right hand in hand with the next verse. Right? It says, but let me read this one, Proverbs 1:5, to the up and coming or the young elder Hawad. Proverbs 1:5, a wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsel. Right. So it goes on to say in 1 Peter 5:6, humble yourselves therefore under the mighty hand of the Most High, that he may exalt you in due time. And that's the problem with these individuals. You know, they want instant gratification. You know, they wouldn't have lasted in the trenches back in the days. They would not have lasted in the trenches back in the day when there was no accolades, when there was no hooping and hollering, no oohs and ahs, no slapping high fives, inside joke. You know, none of that. They wouldn't have lasted. They would have folded like a cheap camera. They would have folded like a cheap suit. They would have folded like a stale taco shell. Facts. They wouldn't have been able to hang back then. There was nothing going on except for time. The only thing that was moving on was time. There wasn't shit. It was a fucking desert out here. Them clowns would have not lasted. Trust me. You know? I would have put more stock in the individuals that fell out back in the days than I would in this new GMO generation. Trust me. Ephesians chapter 6. And let me find the verse. No, I'm sorry, not Ephesians. This is Galatians chapter 6. Galatians 5:9. Got Ephesians on the brain. It says, Galatians 6:9. And let us not be weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. And believe me when I tell you, them guys would have not lasted back then. There was nothing there to keep you propped up, to keep you going forward. You know, there was no clickbait. You know, there were no cheerleaders on the sideline, you know, pumping the men of the Lord up. It was just strictly grinding out. Strictly grinding out. Nothing else. Just grinding out. They would have not fucking lasted. Trust me. But now all of a sudden, you know, there's these big beacons of light, these big beacons of you know, of fortitude, these beacons of these pillars, you know, of the community, so to speak. You know? So let's get into it. Let's go to the book of 2 Peter chapter 2, which is the main scripture that's going to be highlighted, Lord's will, in today's edification. You know, I'm having a little fun with it. 2 Peter 2:1. But there were false prophets also among the people. So we got to stop there, because when I read this yesterday, you know, it was like a slap in the face. I was like, oh wow, you know, which we know what it means, but when we go and we examine it even further, it says, and there were false prophets among the people. What is that talking about? So to get the answer for that, we have to go all the way back to the law, to the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 13:1, because there were false prophets among Jake back then, all the way back in the wilderness, and all throughout the history of Israel. You have always had false prophets. You had the prophets of the Lord, Yahawah, Yahawashi, which were few, by the way, and then you had the prophets of Baal and others, which were the false prophets. So Deuteronomy 13:1, if there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and giveth thee a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, whereof he spake unto thee, saying, let us go after other gods, which thou hast not known, and let us serve them. Now this applies to who it applies. You have individuals that's been in this for a while that this applies to, because when you teaching, you know, about Christ and Jesus Christ and all that, you're promoting another God. You're promoting Jake to go back into slavery. You know, and this is why you have some of these former One West groups that are reverting back to the Christian, the so-called Christian tenets, the Renaissance Christian tenets. You know, you have some of them teaching about the doctrine of hell. Out of all things, you would have thought that that would have been something that they, you know, would have stayed away from. You know, I mean, it's kind of understandable about the MOTB, even though the evidence is all there, it's in place. You know, that wasn't something that was really pushed real super heavy back then, even though, you know, it was coming out, you know, but the infrastructure wasn't in place just yet. So it was, you know, it was still a work in progress. So you could kind of understand that, you know, but hell? Come on, man. You might as well just go ahead and teach that the Lord came for everybody in that aspect. So a lot of these guys were reverting back. So they're showing miracles. They're showing power by teaching out there. But then they're you know, enticing their members to follow after foreign gods, other gods. So it goes on to say in verse 3, thou shalt not hearken unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your power proveth you to know whether you love the Lord your power with all your heart and with all your soul, right? And this is why, you know, you have to beware of these individuals, especially those that are given to change. A guy that's given to change means he's not stable. The Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter, you know, Yahawashi, pretty much, when you go back, pretty much they said to continue in this word. To continue in it the way you were taught it. You know, don't go to the heathen, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the, you know, Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And that has not changed. The message has not changed. Still the same message. You know? So it goes on to say, you shall walk after the Lord your power and fear him and keep the commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and cleave unto him, right? Because you're going to have false prophets that are going to, you know, show certain miracles, so to speak, you know, or show certain attributes that are going to fool you. You know? It says, and what prophet, and that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall what? Be put to death. See, back then, you know, there was no, you know, nothing else. But look, this is why the Apostle Paul said that, you know, you didn't receive no mercy under the law of Moses. You know, but under 2 or 3 witnesses, you were put to death. But the thing is, the mercy came through Yahawashi. But back then, it wasn't a what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't popular to be a false prophet, because false prophets got stoned. It says, because he has spoken to turn you away from the Lord your power, which brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord thy power commanded thee to walk in. So to thrust you out of the way. And this is what a lot of these groups are doing. From the upstarts, the newcomers, to the old heads that have been there for a while. They're thrusting you out of the way by changing the doctrine and just spewing out some fucking madness. Hell, and you can have sex on the Sabbath. I mean, and all kind of just stuff that, you know, would not, I mean, I know eventually One West fell apart, you know, later on, but that shit that they teaching now would have never flew back then. Because from what I heard, I've never heard it myself. I never heard, back then I never heard, as he was called back then, High Priest Yeshaya, teaching about the hell doctrine, but every once in a while he would try to bring it up. Now when he resurfaced, I believe he brought it out, if I'm not mistaken, but I never actually physically heard him say it back then, but I believe it because it was always being shut down, and that was something that was always trying to slide its way in there. And now that these guys don't have any structure or anyone looking over them or checking them on things, they're just saying whatever the fuck they want to say. It's crazy, man. It's amazing. But the Lord said that they're doing that to thrust you out of the way, which the Lord thy power commanded thee to walk in. So shalt thou put the evil away from the midst of thee. If thy brother, the son of thy mother, or thy son, or thy daughter, or the wife of thy bosom, or thy friend, which is as thine own soul, and that's what it meant with King David and Jonathan, the love surpassed the love of a woman, not that they were moles, entice thee secretly, right, saying, let us go and serve other gods which thou hast not known, thou nor thy fathers, namely of the gods of the people which are round about you, nigh unto thee or far off from thee, all the way to this very day, from the one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth. So no matter where you would be, if they're doing this in the ancient world, you would have been put to death. Man, go sit down somewhere. Inside joke. But it was the truth. They would have been put to death, because it goes on to say, thou shalt not consent unto him, nor hearken unto him, neither shall thine eye pity him, neither shalt thou spare, neither shalt thou conceal him. And this is the reason why Jake does what they do today, because there's no penalties and there's no enforcement of the Lord's law, Salakia. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. But the time is coming when it's going to be reestablished. But thou shalt surely delete him, it says K-I-L-L him, thine hand shall be first upon him to put him to deletion, D-E-A-T-H, spell it out, and afterwards the hand of all the people. See, so they didn't play that, the Lord didn't play that back then. It says, and thou shalt stone him with stones that he be deleted, or D-I-E, because he hath sought to thrust thee away from the Lord thy power, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. And this is exactly what these ninjas are doing today. They're seeking to lead you astray out of the way of the Lord Yahawah B'Shem Yahawashi and unto that eternal life. By these wayward philosophies, these wayward doctrines, these wayward religions, this other gospel that the Apostle Paul spoke of. I remember the Apostle Paul said, let them what? Let them be accursed. You know? And you ain't seen nothing yet. But baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. Salak, I fucked that up. The Inside Joker's song. You know, don't be surprised if it gets worse and worse. Don't be surprised, you know, if you hear more outlandish, shit coming from these individuals. Because as we get closer and closer to the end, the scriptures say that evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Because once you teach these false doctrines, what they don't understand is you open portals to these demons. And then them demons feed you with more bullshit. And because you didn't check that demon at the door, he's going to keep feeding you with other demons, more bullshit, and you're going to think that you're in the right spirit, just like them clowns from the so-called New Covenant. They really believe in their heart of hearts that they're right. And they can't see that deceptive spirit that's on them. Just like Bishop Nathaniel can't see it, or should I say General Nathaniel Oliger, and these clowns at the Wi-Fi, and others, ISUPK, and forget about the GOCC. I mean, they're like the orphans, you know. They're way down on the, on the list. You'll never see, vocab roll up on a GOCC, because they're not a threat. It says, and all Israel shall hear and fear and shall do no more any such wickedness as this is among you. Right. And this is the reason why they keep doing it, because there is no repercussions. No, there's nothing happening to these individuals. They're allowed to roam freely. And it seems like they get bigger and bigger, But what it is the Lord, he's building them up like he did Pharaoh in Egypt, and eventually he will destroy them. It says, if thou shalt hear say in one of that, well, you know what? That's pretty much, there's more to it. You can read the rest of it, but that's the point. So when it says in Peter, 2 Peter 2:1, but there were false prophets also among the people, going all the way back to Egypt, going all the way back to the wilderness, and throughout, the land of Canaan and the conquest of the land of Canaan, during the time of the judges, so on and so forth, during the time of, all the way through. Even during the time of King David, King Solomon, there was false prophets all over the place. So that's what that's talking about. Even as there shall be false teachers among you. So now it's going into speaking about false prophets being also among you. This is why, like it says here in there's a precept, 1 John 4:1. Try the spirit whether they are of the Most High, for many false prophets are going out into the world. There's also a scripture, Matthew 24:11, where there shall be many false prophets. And the list is on and on and on. You go through the scriptures, from the beginning all the way to the end, and you'll find all kind of scriptures on false prophets, things that they would do, things that they would say, how they would deceive many, and eventually the penalty of them, being punished. So it says, so there shall be false teachers among you who privately shall bring in damnable heresies. Yeah, because they came in among the flock, then eventually, they started to manifest, them demons that they had on them the whole time. Like the one individual we used to call Egghead, that dude was just a bug out, and he would every once in a while, try to come up with these bugged out breakdowns, and brothers be like, no. And eventually he fell out. So it goes on to say, it says, even denying the Lord that bought them, right? And you have individuals out there that call themselves Israelites, that still call themselves Israelites, that deny the Lord that bought them. Some of them don't believe in the Lord anymore. You know, some of them say that he didn't do any miracles, that he was, you know, that's witchcraft. I mean, all kind of madness. But you ain't seen nothing yet. And bring upon themselves what? Swift destruction, because their destruction is coming. Unbeknownst to them. They think they're in the right spirit, but they're not. It says, and many shall follow their pernicious ways. Remember, Yahawashi said it best. He said that wide is the gate that leadeth to destruction, and many there be that go in thereat. Oh man, it's a lot here. Just bear with me, I kind of messed up. Okay, cool. Let me go to 2 Peter. I want to look up that word. Pernicious. Pernicious ways. The word there is apolea, which is where you get the word Apollo, which means destroyer. Destroying, utter destruction, of perishing, ruin. So there's going to be many of them that are destroyed, that are going to be led that way. Why? Because they're going to believe in that. Now, there was something I was reading. Yes, sir. I typed in on the Google, right? I typed in 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter summary. And I came across this page here. You could do the same thing. It's a Bible reference, right? And it says, what does 2 Peter chapter 2 mean? In 2 Peter chapter 2, Peter describes and harshly condemns the false teachers who had entered the church. He promises their destruction, which will be brought by the Most High. Peter also shows the impact of their lies on those who might believe them. Why? Because these are newcomers. These are those individuals that are not grounded. This is why the Apostle Paul said, oh, how I am pained until Yahawashi be formed in you. Because once Yahawashi takes root in an individual, then the Lord sups with them even more and gives them the ability, you know, to see through the BS and how to dissect things on their own without having to be, you know, shown or led by the hand anymore, because they're weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. But those that are inexperienced, they can fall for these things, you know? That's why you have to be fully persuaded in your own mind. This is why you have to be stable, you know, in this truth. This is why you have to be anchored in. Because if you're not anchored in, like Yahawashi said, the wind's going to come and it's going to blow, you know, and the waves are going to come and crashing. That's all these different philosophies. And their house is going to fall and be destroyed because they were not built upon the stone, which is Yahawashi. It says, who are these false teachers? They were not strangers who showed up spouting false doctrine in the forefront of the attack against the community of the Hamashiachim, which it says Christians. Instead, they came from within the church. They were sneaky. They secretly introduced their destructive heresies or lies about the truth. And this is why the Apostle Paul mentioned this. Let's go to Galatians. And many other precepts, you know. This is just one out of many. You know, Galatians chapter 1. So we should not be surprised that these things are happening. Because the scriptures say that the things that were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. You know, we were told of these things. We read about these things. We've witnessed these things. We've interacted with individuals that fall under this category. So it should come as no surprise. Salaka, you know, I'm being a little animated with it. Should come as no surprise. These lies should come as no surprise. Salaka. All right. So Galatians chapter 1 verse 6 says, I marvel that you are so soon removed from him that called you into the grace of Yahawashi unto another gospel. So the Apostle Paul was like he was amazed. He was just like I can't believe these dudes. I can't believe, you know, I can't believe y'all got swayed that easy. All that work I put into you, all that time, all of this, you know, reassuring and breaking it down to you and explaining to you and, you know, telling you about, you know, but this is what made the church of Berea different from the other churches, because they would actually go back and search these things out. It's not that they didn't believe the Apostle Paul. They believed the Apostle Paul to be a man of the Lord, but they went back and searched it out. You know why? Because hearing what they heard from him, they believed it, but going back and researching it, it established them. It settled them. It grounded them even more. So not only when they spoke it again, they were speaking it, you know, as something they believed, but they were also speaking it with confidence because they actually read it. And they know that if others would follow suit according to what they did, they would find the same things that they found and the same convictions. You see? So the Apostle Paul was like, man, I can't believe you guys, man. And even further, I think it's either further down or in another chapter, he said, you know, have you suffered so many things in vain, if they be yet in vain? Because they began in faith, but now the Pharisees in them were trying to make them keep it or get salvation through keeping the law perfectly. You know? But we use this today as anything that leads Jake astray away from the truth. Just like when we read the second chapter and it speaks about spies coming in to spy among you, they came in to spy what? The liberties that they had in Yahawashi because of the uncircumcised Israelite foreigners. Because I brought the scripture out about the spies years ago to this one dude. Well, I was talking about circumcision. No shit, Sherlock. But the point is that they were spies then, just like they're spies now. So we're using it in the same, you know, aspect of spying. Doesn't matter what the spy is doing or how he's doing it or what he's doing. It matters that he is a spy. That's the point. Some of these guys are just as simple as they come. Is. It says, I marvel that you are so are soon removed from him that called you into the grace of Yahawashi into another gospel. Right, another gospel. Then he goes on to explain, which is not another, right? Because they're using the same Bible. They're using the same scriptures. So it's not another gospel. It's just another interpretation. You see? It says, but there are some that trouble you and would pervert the gospel of Yahawashi. And that's what's going on right now. There's a straight up perversion of the gospel going on among these Israelites. They know that they're Israelites. You know? But these things have to happen. These things have to go on. Because everything in the scriptures must be fulfilled. Everything in the scriptures must be fulfilled. Everything in the scriptures must and will be fulfilled. Oh, I guess a ninja was in there. I'm glad somebody threw some roach spray on him. All right. So let's read a little more. Verse 8. But though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed. Meaning, let him curses be put upon him. You know, let him be anathema maranatha. You know, let him be accursed. Our Lord has come. Then he goes on to repeat it. As we said before, so say I now again, if any man preach any other gospel unto you than that you have received, let him be accursed. So we're equipped with the spiritual ammunition to know these things. This is why the scriptures say, put on the whole armor of the Lord. So when these things come upon us, we have the munition of the Lord to be able to, okay, this said, the Lord said this was going to happen, that was going to happen, this is an example of that, this is an example of that, you know, and he's saying this, but that doesn't go according to the gospel, because the gospel says so and so and such and such. That's why a stranger they will not hear. Why? Because Yahawashi is formed in them and supping with them and guiding them through the maze of lies. You see? All right. So now let's go back to this article. And you know, I like the way that this person put it together, because it, like the word says here, it highlights like the fine points of what the Apostle Peter was speaking about. Just like Elder Yashawamba put out something a while ago dealing with the book of Jude, and how they summarized the book of Jude, and how there were so many heresies in at that time. We're seeing the same thing, because it's the same spirits coming back again doing the same thing. This is the true definition of an apologist. Someone who defends the truth. Not that bullshit that vocab and them are doing. They're not defenders of the truth. They're defenders of white supremacist Renaissance Christianity. That's what they're apologists for, defenders for. It says this passage highlights a few of the more serious sins involved, but not all possible details. Peter doesn't fully reveal all of the contents of their false teaching. Yeah, just like Yahawashi spoke about the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. We don't know what that is. Now you have those, of course, you know, you have the, yeah, well, you know, the Nicolaitans, they were so-and-so and such, and they were doing it. No, that was a doctrine that was being taught back then. And it was led by, I guess it was called by Nicholas, or whatever his name is, Nicolaitan. You know, just like you had many different heresies that were called by different men who were the leaders of that. Just like when you go to the time of the apostles, when Gamaliel said to put them forth, you know, a spell, you had Judas, you know, then you had other men that led certain revolts against the Roman Empire, and they lost. Why? Because they were going against that, you know. So you always had a name attached to that rebellion, Korah's rebellion, and so-and-so's rebellion, and this rebellion, and that rebellion. So the Nicolaitans, so this is what something that they were teaching back then, different doctrines, false teachings. It says this is deliberate so that the point is not lost, right? Because if he would have gave every detail of the heresies, then they said, well, that was talking about this and that. It's not talking about today. It was talking about back then, you know, like the circumcision thing. I mean, the simplicity of Jacob is just, I see why the Most High gets so fucking mad sometimes. You know, my people is foolish. I mean, goddamn. It says not only some specific doctrinal error, by leaving this description general, Peter ensures that his meaning is applied in all such situations. Yes, exactly. Peter does highlight three main aspects of these deceptions. First, these false teachers denied that the sovereignty of Yahawashi. We see that, individuals denying the sovereignty of Yahawashi. They taught that he was not Lord. We see that, even though he bought them with his blood. Second, they openly indulged in sexual sin and taught others to do the same. Right. You know, you can have sex on the Sabbath and many other madness that they're teaching. You know, telling women, well, Chris Rock, you know what he should have done is he should have had sex with Jada just to get back at Will Smith. It's fucking adultery, man. The fuck is wrong with you guys? What the fuck is wrong with these guys? My goodness, man. I see why the Lord said that judgment was first begin at the house of Israel. It says they used lies to, finally, they used lies to exploit the Hamashiachim, or Christians, for their own gain. They were greedy, yeah. You had that same thing going on today. These individuals using the congregation for their own personal pocket. The pocket? For their own personal gain. Now, as the Apostle Paul said, if we sold unto you spiritual things, is it a big thing if we, reap from you carnal things? Because if someone is teaching you the truth, yeah, you're supposed to take care of them. But these guys are doing it as these people out here are their personal bank accounts. You know? We live in fucking apartments. You know? We don't live in fucking mansions, you know, in different places. We don't have, I mean, big, you know, palatial homes like palaces. You know? It's crazy, man. You guys got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 homes. You know, they got all kind of luxurious cars. You know, we don't need all of that shit. Having food and raiment, be there with content. You got a running car, you know. I mean, we used to, you know, we got little better cars now, used cars, but a little better than they were before. But nevertheless, they're still used cars. You know, they don't break down like they used to, as much as they used to. But nevertheless, they still use cars. You know, most brothers live in apartments. You know, some brothers might have, you know, bought a home, that, you know, is something modest. Not in no palatial palaces or nothing like that. But nevertheless, they're still humble livings. It's not, you know, like these individuals living the life of Riley. Anyways, let's get back to this. So it says, as both encouragement and warning, Peter assures his readers that the Most High is aware of the practice of these false teachers. Their destruction is coming, hanging over them even now. This is not something the Most High is ignorant of or powerless against. Peter lists historical examples to demonstrate that the Most High is ready and willing to bring destruction on those who reject him. He did not spare even the angels who sin. He did not, which that's going into something else that's dealing with pretty much with us in this flesh, you know. He did not spare the entire ancient world that lived in the time of Noah, though only Noah and his family were saved, right? Because they represented the elect back then. And the Most High burned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other 3 cities to ashes for their wickedness, though he saved Lot. Right, which shows you that the elect that are going to be saved are a much smaller group than the many that are going to be destroyed. Peter's point is that the Most High knows how to both rescue his people, the Israelites, and punish the unrighteous at exactly the right time. The final and ultimate reckoning will occur on the day of judgment, right? Let's see what else we got. And, you know, I mean, I'll stop it there. Maybe we'll come back to it. Maybe we'll come back to that. So let's get back to 2 Peter 2. Let's read 2 again. It says that many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. Right. Now, I looked up the word pernicious, but now let's look it up in the offline dictionary. Pernicious. Exceedingly harmful, working or spreading in a hidden and usually injurious way, right? Because they don't do it openly, they do it secretly, because they're looking to heap disciples unto themselves till they get enough to where they can come out openly with it. But for the most part, it's usually underground for a certain period of time. And it's happened many times. And through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you. And that's what they do. They make merchandise of the people as if the people were their personal ATMs or personal bank accounts, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. Yeah, because eventually the Lord is going to judge them. For if the Most High spared not the angels that sinned, the word angel just simply means messenger. All the angels. These are these angelic forces, the Nephilims, the angels that God kicked out of heaven. No. It's talking about the sons of God, which was the line of Adam through his son Seth. Those righteous men eventually became corrupt and fell. That's it. And how did they fall? By partaking in the iniquities and the sins of these other nations. You know, which we fall under that because like the scriptures say, as in Adam's sin and death came upon all men. You know, so we're under the curse of Adam, you know, to die, to be in this flesh. This is why the Apostle Paul said, you know, who shall deliver me from the body of this sin? And that's a whole nother lesson right there. The word angel simply means messenger. It comes from the Greek angelos. It comes from the Hebrew mala'akah, and it just simply means messenger. It could be an angel from the heavens, but in this case, it's not talking about the actual angels. It's talking about a messenger. But cast them down to hell, meaning here to this state that we're in. And it's also what? Subject to death. All flesh is subject to death right now, including them nuts, them stir-fried nuts, you know, from the so-called New Covenant. But cast them down to hell, meaning to the grave, to this hellish condition, and deliver them into chains of darkness. What are the chains of darkness? These bodies. That's why there's a constant fight and a constant struggle between the flesh and the spirit. The spirit knows what's right, the flesh wants what's wrong. It's a constant fight, battle back and forth. A great example of that, if you want to get more understanding of it, for those of you that are not aware of it, read the book of Romans, the 7th chapter. The Apostle Paul breaks it down beautifully. You know how there's a struggle between doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing. And usually doing the wrong thing, which is the flesh, usually wins. But not always, but that's the struggle, that's the fight. It says to what? To be reserved unto judgment, right? Because when the judgment comes, you got to understand that when Yahawashi brings a judgment, Yahawashi brings a judgment, the judgment is going to consist of two parts. It's going to consist of destruction for the wicked and of deliverance for the righteous. You know? It says, and spare not the old world, but save Noah, the 8th person, the preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned it with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly. Right, so that was an example, but they're not following that example today, because they're pickled in Moism. You know, these people, especially Jake, they're pickled in Moism. And deliver just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. Yeah, and that was another, you know, example of a just man, which represented the elect, him and his 2 daughters, because his wife didn't make it, you know, being delivered from the destruction before the Lord brought the destruction on them. For that righteous man dwelling among them, in seeing and hearing, vexes righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Because he actually saw these things. This is why he admonished the angels. No, please, he didn't know they were angels. He said, please, sirs, come on into my house. You know, trust me, you don't want to, you know, he didn't, we don't know exactly how he said it, but he wanted them to come into his house, because he said, basically, you don't want to see what goes on out here, you know, when the freaks come out. You know, the freaks come out at night, you know. They were doing shit during the day, so just imagine once the sun went down. The freaks come out at night. It said, the Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. Right, and that's the judgment. The righteous saved, the rest deleted. But chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness. And that's these individuals that know that they're Israelites, that are teaching wayward doctrines, wayward philosophies. Salakia. It says, and despise government. Right, they despise authority. You know, they don't want to be subjected to authority. This is why they'll go from one camp to another. They won't, you know, deal with any one specific camp, because they don't want to come under the order. They want to do their own thing. But that's not what this is about. Other men have labored, and you have entered into their labors. No other foundation can man lay but that which is laid, which is Yahawashi. Be careful how you build upon another man's foundation. If the Lord was dealing with you specifically, you would not have to use the platform of the men that came before you, Hebrew Israelites, to build your bullshit and then add your bullshit to it. You would have came out with your own teachings. You would have came out with your own philosophy, your own doctrine. You would not need, to build upon a foundation that was already established by others. Dig it? It says, presumptuous are they, because they are very presumptuous. Self-willed, because they will not come under the subjection of the men of the Lord. They're self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignities, right? I mean, talking all kinds of shit about the men that came before them. I mean, talking reckless. Like we read, the definition for the word insolence. The trait of being rude and impertinent, inclined to take liberties, right? And they're taking liberties, but they're going to be stopped. Whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not railing accusations against them before the Lord, right? So angels don't bring railing accusations against other angels, right? But these as natural brute beasts, because that's what you guys are. You're nothing but natural brute beasts. You're no different than an ox, or a wild animal out in the field, made to be taken and destroyed, because you're on a path of destruction and you don't even realize it. You're dead and you don't even know it. Speak evil of the things that they understand not, right? You're speaking evil of something you don't even understand. You don't even have the mental capacity, because you're a mental midget. You don't have the mental capacity to understand what you're doing. It says, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption. And these individuals, they don't even take into consideration that you had men in the past going all the way back. There's all kind of examples going all the way back in the history of men that stood up against, the leadership and were destroyed. Dathan, Corey, Abiram, and others. They don't see that. The men that came up against the prophets of Baal, and what happened? They all got destroyed. One thought he was invincible, the other one thought he could fly. They were both wrong. Inside joke. It says, and shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, right, as they that counted pleasure to riot in the daytime. Spots they are, and blemishes. So you're nothing but spots and blemishes. You know what how the Lord feels about an animal that has spots and blemishes. He don't want that. Sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you, right? Because all along they have all these things in their mind. They're not really, subjected to the doctrine, but they're playing the role. They're going through the motions. Having eyes full of adultery, you see a lot of these groups that's into that. You could just imagine the madness that goes on, behind closed doors. And that cannot cease from sin. Right, and they cannot cease from sin. And this is why, Barak, Yahawashi, he put the spirit on the Apostle years ago, back in the 90s, to ban women from coming to the school. That was a brilliant, that was a brilliant stroke of genius from, that the Lord gave him, to ban women from coming to the school. Because you know what that did? That eliminated all of that bullshit. That eliminated temptation. That eliminated that adulterous spirit. That eliminated men looking at women, that were married and lusting. That avoided women that were there that were married, lusting after other men. That removed the whole adulterous spirit in just that one genius stroke. Think about it. It says beguiling unstable souls, and this is the point. This is why we read in that article where he was saying that, you know, those that were not, you know, pretty much that were not that deep into it, they were not stable. So they got what? They got taken by these fake, phony frauds. It says, and heart they have exercised with covetous practices, right? Because that's what they do. They see something that you have and they want it. You know? And these are the worst kind of individuals, man. You know, that bring that mentality that they had in the world into the truth. Those are the worst kind. And it says, what cursed children? Because eventually the Lord's gonna get them. You're only fooling yourself. You smoke crack, don't you? Inside joke. It says, which have forsaken the right way. And that's what they've done. They've forsaken the right way. Why? Because a lot of them are bag takers. You got to remember that. A lot of them are bag takers and they sold out. They took the Lord and they took the money and they sold the Lord out. Following the way of Balaam, the son of Bozor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. And a lot of these guys love the wages of unrighteousness. You know, it's all about that dollar bill with them. You know, and once you sell out, you know the deal. Yahawashi said it best. You know, what will a man give in exchange for his soul? You can't go back, because that's when them devils come in and delete you. Look at those entertainers that sold out and that tried to bite the hand that fed them. Eventually they either end up in a nut house, in jail, or deleted. But was rebuked for his iniquity, and these individuals are getting rebuked by the prophets, by a great millstone. The dumb ass speaking with man's voice forbade the madness of the prophet. And a lot of these individuals are mad. The scriptures say the spiritual man is mad. Anytime you're teaching about hell, or you can have sex on the Sabbath, or John the Baptist, you know, fell out the truth, and many of those other bugged out doctrines, that individual is mad. It says these are wells without water, right? Because they're broken cisterns. Matter of fact, okay, that's verse 17. Let's go real quick to Hebrews. I believe that's chapter 2. Now, I'm not sure. I got my red Bible, so I'll pull that out if I has to. Oh, yes, it's in here. Hebrews 2:1. Therefore, we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard. That's why the Apostle Paul said, what? Continue in the things which thou hast learned. So we should give more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should what? Let them slip. This is why the Apostle Peter came back and said, give diligence to make your calling and election sure. Now there's a precept here for let them slip. It says, Greek, run out as a leaking vessel. So they're clouds without waters, right? Because why? Because the vessel that they have, that old ass bottle, ripped, and the oil and the wine is spilling everywhere. So every time they fill it up, it gets diluted more and more, to the point there's nothing in there left from the original. So going back to 2 Peter 2:17, these are well without waters, clouds that are carried with a tempest, to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever. For when they speak great swelling words of vanity, and the darkness is reserved forever, they'll never get it. They'll never come to the 100% knowledge. They will never be classified as, you know, having an unction of the Lord and you know all things. Because they are sold out, you know, and for whatever other reasons. For when they speak great swelling words of vanity, right, and you see them giving these $1,000,000 speeches, they are lured through the lust of the flesh, through much wantonness, meaning much undiscipline, those that were clean escape from them who live in error. Because you have the Israelites coming into this, which are escaping this world just to fall into the hand of these foxes and these demons that are bringing them right back to the shit that they were just delivered from, but even worse. Because some of these guys are incorporating Renaissance Christianity into the truth. Crazy, man, it's crazy. While they promise them liberty, they themselves are the servants of corruption, for of whom a man is overcome, of the same as he brought in bondage. For if after they have escaped the pollutions of the world, through the knowledge of the Lord and Savior, Yahawashi, they are again entangled therein, meaning they get caught back up into the world, and overcome, the latter end of them is worse than the beginning. Right. Why? Because then you have those 8 demons that come and they get, and get them. I get ready to bounce out of here because I see some children coming. They probably coming to play in here, I'm pretty sure. So it says, for it had been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than after they have known it to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. Right. So it's better that they never knew the truth than to know it and turn away from it. But it has happened unto them according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the sow that was washed to a wallowing in the mire. So basically they went right back to the same madness that they just came out of. They got washed by the word of the Lord, and then they got dirtied again, sullied again, with the same thing that they had escaped, which is the madness of this world, So pretty much with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say Shalom. Hello, how you doing?